So in this section of the intensive, we're going to introduce the term global citizen and global citizenship and look at how that relates to our implementation and action on the Sustainable Development Goals. So we'll look at what this term means, how we can be a global citizen, and how that relates to our taking action on the goals. And what it is this term really provides context for what kind of state of mind, the thinking that goes behind any action or planning or implementation of the goals. So it's something to keep in mind whenever you're thinking about sustainable development or sustainability. And the good news is, just by listening to this and learning about the term global citizenship, is actually taking action towards one of the goals. Look at goal 4 to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. And our target 4.7 is about developing the knowledge and skills to promote sustainable development and sustainability. And one of those themes that we can educate ourselves and others on is the term of global citizenship, which ties into an appreciation of cultural diversity and culture's contribution to sustainable development. And one of our indicators for that target is to the extent to which global citizenship education is kind of built into the mainstream. So once you know what this term means and you think about this term, you should try and use it in every day, thinking about that when you're talking to others about sustainability, convey the concept of global citizenship, and that will help the world move towards SDG 4. And then when everybody understands the term and thinks about global citizenship, then we've achieved that target of 4.7, or part of it at least. So what is global citizenship? So it's a term for a person that accepts and sees that we live in an interconnected global society. And that means that any actions that we take in our country or our community or our local area will affect the globe. And that means when we're considering things like sustainable action, we need to consider the globe as one community instead of lots of different smaller countries and entities. And kind of unfortunately, that's not how the world is run. We see lots of governments and organizations, all with different motivations, that make this a more of a challenging concept. But you as an individual can very easily think on a global citizen scale. And that means when we make everyday choices or actions, we should always think about the global implications of those actions. And those choices and decisions and actions can be something as simple as what you're having for dinner. When you're buying your food, think about where it's come from, who's been impacted by that food production and transport and all those resource costs. Or it might be something much larger, like the scope of a huge research project. And then you need to think about how you're including those different cultures and groups and make sure nobody's been excluded from that sustainable development research. So it applies to every kind of level of decision making and planning and action that we take. And it's also key to make sure we're bringing sustainability and sustainable development to the world as a whole and not just our local or small community around us. This is taking globally minded social, political, environmental, and economic action on a worldwide scale. So that just kind of summarizes what we've said, that we need to think about our actions in all of these different groups and areas and how they apply on a global scale. And finally, a key part of this is to promote education for sustainability and global citizenship as well. So for some of the goals, this is quite easy to grasp. The idea of climate action. It's obviously a global challenge. If we emit CO2 in this country, it doesn't just affect this country, it affects the global climate and the changes there. But other things may be more difficult. If we think about our sustainable cities and communities, a lot of that decision making is made on the kind of regional or local community level. But that does have impacts on the global scale. If we think about what materials we're using, where they're sourced from, how they interconnect with the other goals, are we using low carbon materials to develop our cities? We might be able to use cities in the UK as case studies or cities around the world as case studies to promote global research on sustainable communities and cities. It's important that we keep this term in mind and think that whenever we're acting sustainably, we're thinking about global citizenship. And that also means thinking about all the goals interconnectedly, as we said. This is obviously quite closely linked to goal 17, partnership for the goals, as we want to strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. So this goal really, the key outcome is to work as a global community to reach these goals. So we need to be a global citizen to be part of that global community to bring about goals to the whole globe. So that means keeping lots of different communities and regions in mind whenever we think about sustainable development. We don't want to just narrow down to our local area. We need to keep that global view in mind. But just to caveat that a bit, what we do need to think about is that doesn't mean every action or decision we take has a global scope. So not every project or sustainability development or anything we think about doesn't have to impact everybody on the planet. It can be as small as you want, but you just have to make sure that you're thinking globally minded. So for example, if we wanted to help reduce hunger in our local area, and we wanted to produce food and give that out to people that needed it, that's fine. We don't have to try and feed everybody on the planet at once. But what we need to think about is we can consider, do we have options where that food comes from? Can we make more sustainable choices when we're sourcing that food? Can we use low carbon? Are we excluding anybody from this food program? Are there any communities we're not reaching for whatever reason? And so that's what we mean by globally minded. And on the bigger scale, to go back to my other example, if we looked at a sustainability research project, we'd want to think about where is that research heading. Say it was something about sustainable agriculture. We'd want to try and include as many researchers from as many different countries and institutions as possible. We've seen past kind of failed efforts at sustainability where people from more developed countries go into other countries and try and just dictate how things should be done. And that's not thinking with a globally minded view. That's thinking that we know best and we're going to come and tell you how to do things, which doesn't work. So it's just key to keep that in mind whenever you're thinking about what kind of action we want to take. So we go back to our kind of first motivations for our sustainable development goals, which was that acceptance that sustainability and sustainable development were challenges too great for any single organization of government to approach, and we really need a global view, which is why it's key to be a global citizen. So from the sprint above, you should have thought about a definition of a global citizen, and you can reflect on this now. Think, did you get it right? Did you get it wrong? Was there any gaps in that? Maybe adapt that definition. And then think about yourself. Do you feel like you're a global citizen? Do you think with a globally minded viewpoint on your day-to-day life, or are there areas where you maybe don't think about these things? That's not to say there's anything wrong with not thinking globally minded in every decision. I know I don't. It's quite tricky to think about, but it's important to keep trying to improve and think about that in all our day-to-day decision makings, and also with things like our work and research lives, and developing the concepts of global citizenship through education. So it's a very quick run through of what it means to be a global citizen. The following few sprints have a bit more information on that. But as with everything, you're encouraged to go away, maybe do some reading, have a look at some other terms of definitions of global citizenship.